To infinity,
What's this?
Go! That's it! Go!
Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. I'm your host, Larry Vasquez, and you're listening to episode 47. You should recognize that music if you've been around animation and podcasts for any number of years. That is the music from the Animation Podcast with Clay Kaytis. And that should give you a hint of who our guest will be tonight. Yes, we do. We have Clay Kaytis, the director of Angry Birds and longtime Walt Disney Animation Studios animator. If you go to Clay's IMDb, he worked on Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, Tarzan, Fantasia 2000, The Emperor's New Groove, Treasure Planet, Home on the Range, Chicken Little, Meet the Robinsons, Bolt, Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, and Frozen, just to name the feature films. He worked on many of the shorts as well. So it is a great privilege to have him on this podcast. I've been a longtime fan of his podcast back in the day when he was doing those. And so it's just great to be able to take some of his time, he's a busy guy, to sit down and get him on the other side of the seat and talk with him and pick his brain a little bit. So I really do appreciate him taking the time here. We had a little bit of technical difficulty on the recording, so I do apologize for the quality of the podcast. Mine, Mike, for whatever reason, did not come in that great, but fortunately Clay's did, and that's who you're here to listen to anyway. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Again, I appreciate you taking the time. It's always neat to get you guys in here and just the wealth of information. You've been in the industry for quite some time. And as you mentioned in our pre-interview, way back with Jason Ryan and Fantasia 2000 and even the early CG stuff there at Disney. So
yeah, totally.
So if you can get in maybe to just how you got into the industry. I kind of read a little bit about your bio, but
Sure.
what you thought to get into animation, or what kind of sparked that for you?
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to talk with you and all your listeners. And I love podcasts and the stuff you guys do. So it's just awesome. So I think I was mentioning before that I've been asked a lot about my career and how I got into it. And I think I should have been a smarter kid because all my hobbies really pointed towards doing animation. I just didn't realize it until I was in college, and I grew up on Disney films. We always had the videos, the VHS tapes of all the classic Disney films. My sister worked at Disneyland before I did, and when I was 16, I got a job there, and I sold churros. And so there's always this like Disney connection. And when I was a kid, I really was into like special effects. ILM was like my dream, and makeup effects were like, when I was really young, I was like, I'm going to be a makeup artist. I was going to do monsters, and that was my goal.
Very cool.
And I just never got into it though. I was a big fan of it. I got Cinefex, I read Starlog, all those old magazines that taught you how to do it. And I just never did it. I learned all about it though, and then I went to college and in high school too. I did student government. I did, t-shirts for clubs. I did float designs for parades and things like that in high school, and so it was always creative stuff, but I never really put it together that I would end up doing animation. Mm-hmm. It's just a strange thing. And I loved movies too. My dad was a fireman, and in the city of Orange in Orange County, like firemen got free tickets to the movies. So every weekend we would go to the movies.
That's cool.
We saw every movie when I was a kid. It was a big thing in my family, and so I grew up watching movies. And I should have just like added all this up and just gone straight to Disney, but I didn't realize that's what I wanted to do. So I went to USC for like 2.5 years. I started as a biological sciences major. I was going to be a doctor.
Wow.
Dr. Kaytis. And after about, a semester of that, I was like, this is crazy. And I took a chemistry class, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I was like, maybe I'll be a business major. So I switched to that. And then I took 1 or 2 drawing classes while I was there. But I was just like really confused. I didn't know what to do. And I never thought I would work in film. I never thought I would work in animation. I just was lost. And then, I found this animation class at a high school. I was at college, but there was this high school that had this night course And this woman that knew my mom was like, hey, maybe Clay would like this. And so I went to this class, and it was like the coolest thing. It was Dave Master. Many of you guys may have heard of him. He's probably retired now, but he was at Warner Brothers for a little while in the recruiting department. And a lot of students went there, like Sean Jimenez. He's a designer on Gravity Falls, I think.
Okay.
Bert Klein, he's an animator at Disney now. His wife, Jennifer Klein, she went to the class. Mike Belzer, who was head of animation on Meet the Robinsons.
Very cool.
He was a stop motion guy in the class. So a bunch of kids went, John Awashima, or John Kubo, you might know him as. A lot of kids went through that class, and it was just this cool thing where I showed up. There were 120 students there every night, like
wow.
5 o'clock at night. And I did a bouncing ball on paper. And I was like, this is awesome. It's so weird. I kind of stumbled into this thing, and I was like, I could do this forever. You do that first bouncing ball, and it's like you've done magic.
It's alive. That's right.
Yeah. And the ball it's hard, but it's a good gateway.
For sure.
And it gets you kind of hooked. And I had gone to the class intending to be a computer animator because I didn't know how to draw. I mean, like I said, I took one drawing class in school, but I hadn't like set my life and career up to like become a 2D animator. And at the class, they showed us like, this is a portfolio. These are gesture drawings. This is animal drawings from the zoo. These are figure drawings. And I'd never, done that stuff. And so the good thing is like, they laid it out. They're like, these are the things you need to do to get a job in the industry, at least entry level. And, I guess people are like, oh, you must be talented. And I think I was just smart enough to like look at that on paper and be like, well, I could replicate that portfolio, or at least try,
Uh-huh.
And so I went to every drawing class I could find. I snuck into art center workshops. I went to these church basement drawing classes. At the time of CIFA held drawing classes, and I did that with Dave Brain. Everywhere I could go, I went to drawing, and I basically dropped out of school. I dropped out of USC. I failed all my classes that semester. And so it was really like this thing where I had to succeed. I was in many ways cutting myself off from any other options.
Uh-huh.
It's crazy when I think about it. And I was 20 at the time. And so I was really starting my education and my career and my art training at the age of 20.
Okay. Did you feel like you took to drawing pretty well? You said
No.
that. Okay. Because you said you didn't do a whole lot of that stuff before.
It's such a struggle. I mean, drawing is hard. And I think because I started so late in life, like a lot of these, look at Eric Goldberg. He's doing flip books at the age of 7, and he's a master. And like all these guys, when I eventually got to Disney, it was like so intimidating and so kind of not soul crushing, because it was inspiring, but I compared myself to those guys for so long. And it was like kind of really devastating, like artistically and personally, to be like, I want to be like these guys, but I'm this guy. And, I did enough to, obviously I got an internship through the class. There was this great connection with Disney. I got an internship at Disney, and I got into, being a cleanup in-betweener on Hunchback. And
Very cool.
I became a breakdown. Then I moved into rough in-betweening and eventually became an assistant animator and an animator in 2D. And so I kind of crawled my way, to be there for a while. And those 5 jobs I just described, that took me 12 years.
Oh, okay.
I was a slow learner,
Okay.
But I was tenacious, and I held on, and I didn't get fired, thankfully. And I was very close many times, just not because I was a bad guy, but because like they do these, like, we called them the shame sheets, where it would be like the footage, and Mark Hain was always at the top, and then it goes down, and Clay Kaytis is like at the bottom. And the productions look at that, and they're like, well, is this guy worth keeping around?
Right.
And I had heard, I'm just rambling on, but stop me if you need me to.
I love it.
I had heard at one point that Ron and John, they saw me on the list of like, he's out of here. And they were like, there may be something about this guy. So I don't know if that's true. I had heard that. And so if it's true, thank you, Ron and John, for saving my career. But,
that's so cool.
Yeah. I had animated on Treasure Planet. That was, I guess, my first animation was on Fantasia 2000. I did a couple of shots in the Rhapsody in Blue sequence. And then I rolled straight into Emperor's New Groove. I worked with Doug Frankel on Chicha, who was the wife of Pacha. And then I worked with Bruce Smith on Pacha. And then on Treasure Planet, I worked with Ken Duncan on Scroop, the spider guy. What an introduction.
Yeah.
And that's where Ron and John knew my work. And I think they were just like, well, this guy's got potential. He's just not there yet.
Gotcha.
So
that's an interesting ability, I think, to have that kind of eye to catch that.
Yeah, for them to see. I mean, it's just taking a chance, I guess. And I think that's a really important thing. And it's, I've heard Ed Catmull talk about this, and it's really critical to kind of look at a person and understand their trajectory. It's like they're on a point in time, but that's not the end of it. And are they going up or are they going down? And even like when I was working at Disney and we, were reviewing people, it was always about the uptick or the downtick. And it's really critical, and sometimes it's like, that some person is just on the downswing and they're going to bring it back up. Other times it's like, well, they're down and they're down last time and they're down the time before that. So they're plummeting, and
gotcha.
How do we pull them up and how do we help them? So seeing people's trajectory is really important. And thankfully, I guess they saw something in me.
That's awesome.
So I stayed on, and eventually my dream of being a computer animator started to happen. At the time, what was it, 96, 97, Toy Story was coming out. And they showed the first act. Actually, maybe not even the first act. It was the whole toy soldiers, the Green Army men, scoping out the birthday party sequence, and it was just storyboards, and it was awesome. And I was like, "This is going to crush everybody. CG is going to take over the world." And I told myself and some friends, I'm like, I got to learn this. This is the future.
Okay, that was one of the questions I had. Did you take well to CG?
Yeah.
Do you think it was because you struggled with learning 2D later in life?
Partly. It's also because I was always a big computer nerd. My parents bought me a Apple IIe when I was in 4th grade, and all the teachers were like, "What are you guys doing? This is crazy. Who does this?" And it was really when computers were brand new. And so I was really facile with a computer from an early age. And using it's funny, using a mouse and like I did t-shirts in high school with Adobe Illustrator. And so I was very kind of comfortable knowing hotkeys. And it's weird. At that time, it was new.
Yeah.
Not many people knew computers that well. And so I was just really comfortable.
That's awesome.
Sit down, read the Maya manual, go through all the tutorials, and just get it. Mm-hmm. So the technical thing was a huge hurdle. At that time, like when Chicken Little was starting, we brought all the 2D animators, and some people just didn't really take to it because there was the first technical hurdle of using a computer and then translating your animation mind into a computer. And I was just lucky. The computer was easy for me. The animation was always hard, but I was kind of at this point where I was just kind of getting animation in 2D, and then I stepped over to CG where it was like the whole drawing aspect of it was taken away. And I was just like, oh my God, I can run, I can fly. So I wasn't a fantastic animator from the start of doing CG, but my learning accelerated really fast.
That's fantastic. Very cool.
And I just got it, So I worked on Chicken Little, and I think Eamon Butler recommended me to be a supervisor on, at the time it was American Dog, Bolt. And so, one CG feature in, after struggling for so many years in 2D, I was like, okay, I can finally actually just focus on performance and animation and actually try to become a good animator. I don't think I was even good at that time, but just learning got a lot easier.
Was there any guys?
That's 12 years into my career, maybe 15 years in. So it took forever. But I'm okay with that.
Yeah. That's actually a great, I saw a meme for Pokemon Go, and it said it was from the CEO, and it said it's taking us 20 years to make an overnight success.
Yeah.
And it's just, for me, it just helps put things in perspective that we want instant this or instant that. And it takes grinding. It takes.
Yeah. And I've met a lot of students and kids, and they always want to be in a different place. And I get it. You always want to improve and get better and reach for something higher. But at some point, you really need to accept you're where you're at because of what you've done and who you are. And it's okay. You know, as long as you're not stagnant and getting worse and crusty and learning and growing, you got to be happy with that,
Yeah.
It's good to be ambitious, but I could talk for a whole hour just about comparing yourself to other artists and feeling down. I went through that for years. It's weird. And I kind of, after a while, learned it's okay to be who you are. And as long as you're doing your best, it's weird. It's like a poster on the wall, but it really helps.
And it helps coming from you guys like you who have been in it for a while, because particularly for students who are still kind of working through it, you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel, or you don't look back. It's hard for you to look back. Hearing it from you, you're like, wow, they struggled with that, huh? And
or it's like, you want to be Glen Keane. It's like, no one's Glen Keane. Glen Keane is Glen Keane, and no one's going to be him.
Right.
And you can strive to emulate him and be as good as him, but at some point you have to kind of be yourself. And I think that's the strongest animator to be. That's why you have James Baxter and a Glen Keane. And I'm talking about all these 2D guys, but like, that's where my mind was. I'm like, I got to be as good as these guys. And it's like, one, that's impossible. Just focus on yourself. It's not a race. It's not a competition. As long as you're doing work that makes you happy and you can keep a job that you like, that's important too.
That's great.
That's all that matters,
Very cool. Was there any guys that were there that you kind of gravitated to and really kind of learned from?
There's kind of like two phases in my career. One's the 2D stuff, obviously, and then the CG. In 2D, Ken Duncan was always kind of a mentor to me.
Okay.
We always got along really well. Duncan Studios is his thing, and we just got along. And he's a kind of he'll smile at this. He's a cranky guy, but either you get him or you don't. And I really just got him. We got along swimmingly, I could say. And he really helped me. He really supported me. And I still, when I'm doing reviews and animation and thinking of things that he taught me, he just really took his time and told me the things that people told him. And it was a great mentorship.
Very cool.
Also, when I was a trainee in animation, Doug Frankel, again, taught me a lot of stuff. And then in CG, Nick Ranieri was on Chicken Little, and he just really taught me a lot of the way he looks at animation. It's weird how so much of like who I am as an animator comes from my early career, especially cleanup. I think I learned 70% of animation from Brian Clift, who was the cleanup lead on Clopan on Hunchback. He really cared and wanted to impart the stuff that was important when you're doing good cleanup. And it was all the basics of animation. I just didn't know it at the time.
Did you feel like in that environment that people were willing to share information and everybody just wanted to grow?
Oh yeah. And I've never seen an environment where that wasn't. So I'm, granted I did work at Disney for 19 years and that's all I know, and I don't know how different things are, but going out of Disney to direct Angry Birds, it was great. It was refreshing and different, but it was all the same. Animators are the same all over the world. They just all want to do great work. They want to entertain and see their stuff on the screen and make people laugh. They're all the same.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, I have to learn how to talk to these guys. It's like, no, they're the same blood,
Now, let's go a little bit more into your CG era there at Disney. That was a big, I'm assuming, transition for Disney as well, because there seemed that they were kind of learning and growing even in that portion of time. There's a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And it was interesting because, CG was growing. Studios had, I would say, a good head start on us. DreamWorks had done Ants already and working on their, maybe third movie by the time Chicken Little came out. And obviously Pixar was going wild. Mm-hmm. And I think Blue Sky was making films. So Disney got into the game kind of late. And you could see the learning curve. I mean, Chicken Little was pretty rough. And like Meet the Robinsons was next. And it's like, you look back at that and you're like, ooh, it's not the prettiest, but it was like one of those things where it was, for me and other people, it was frustrating that, the 2D stuff could look so amazing and so kind of crafted and beautiful and controlled. And the CG stuff didn't have that. And it was always like, how do we do this? How do we make it feel like a Disney movie, And I think for me, Bolt was a great step forward.
Yes.
In terms of appeal and understanding angles and things like that. And then Tangled was like, I was like, we did it. We finally made a movie,
Was there any, I can imagine as or if there was a new studio, maybe saying having worked on Chicken Little or even Meet the Robinsons, there would have been less of a standard, I guess, versus Disney actually doing that. You have all this history of beautiful animation. Did that weigh heavy on you guys, or was it just, hey, we got to learn this here? Or
that
kind of comparison?
I think it did. And even like when they decided to do Meet the Robinsons, I was like, that's crazy. Why would you do a movie full of humans when you can't even you know, do chickens, you know. So it was, but you know, it's one of those things where I think the studio was like, we can take on this challenge. It may not be, you know, perfect, but it's like it's better than playing it easy, you know,
Right. Okay.
playing it safe. And so, you know, I think it was probably a good thing in the end, but it was, I thought it was premature at the time to like really like, hey, we're going to make a movie full of 50 different humans. It's like, that's a tall order, you know, it's hard stuff. And I felt like we needed to build up to it, but you know, it's all, you know, it's all said and done. So you can't take it back. And
right.
I think it's like, you got to accept it and own it and like it, you know?
Yeah. Well, no, there is definitely, that's why I guess I bring up that question, because there was definitely stuff to like about it, but I just wonder how sometimes if there's a stigma because it's Disney that you kind of, there's something to compare it to versus if it was just a brand new studio doing that kind of, that work, you know?
Yeah. But I think, you know, at least I do, I kind of have to look at all films through the same kind of filter of like, is it good and entertaining and appealing?
Gotcha.
You know, I don't really care who does it, but you know, it's like, it's got to be good, right?
Okay, so now we moved to Bolt, we moved to Tangle. Now Tangle was, like you said, that kind of a we did it moment there.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you learned during that process for that movie?
Well, early on that show, I remember Glenn was on vacation and John Cars was on vacation. Those are the two other heads of animation on that show. And there was this like, you know, monthly get together and heads of departments talk about what they're working on. And I just made a decision to go in front of the studio and say, this is going to be the best human animation in CG that's ever been done. And I said it. And people were kind of like stunned, like, whoa, this is like, you know, throwing down the gauntlet. But the thing I learned from that is kind of like, if you call out, like, it's like Babe Ruth pointing at the fences, you know, we're going to do this. And people like align themselves to that vision, even if you're kind of full of crap. But I wasn't. I mean, we really were like this. We're going to do this. We're going to do everything we can to make this happen.
What made you so confident? And because it's funny, because I was talking with my brother here recently, who's an animator as well, and that is still for him. That's what he would say right now. That's probably his favorite one, even from Disney still, where he's looking at the humans and he goes, it's just fantastic. Yeah. So, I mean, here you called it out, and by many critics, that would be an accurate statement even now. What was it that made you so confident at that time?
Well, you know, when you have Glen Keane in your pocket, that helps. But I think that was a big part of it. You know, I've met artists that can draw and or animate amazingly, but they don't know how to explain it. They're almost like savant-ish, where they just do it and it's natural and it just comes out of them and they can't explain how they do it. And then you have an artist like Glenn who can point and explain what he's doing. And a lot of it was, you know, me and John kind of probing him and prodding him and really getting into his head of like, you know, we would point at lines on his drawings and say, why did you do that thing? And he's like, well, that's energy, you know, and why is that, why do you have that hook in that thing? Well, that's like the muscle tension. And it's like, okay, so now we're understanding like why he draws what he draws. And he can actually verbalize and articulate what he's thinking as he's drawing. And then you can take those ideas of a 2D image and start to put those into the model and into the rigs. And it was just having him as a tool to kind of like pull all this information from it, and then find a way to translate that into the models and the rigs and the animation that actually works.
Okay, because that was my next question here. When he's drawing that, he's drawing those curves and lines with purpose in that, whereas in CG we're not doing that. So how did you translate that? What was it that made you translate it to X for CG?
Yeah, I mean, he was invaluable. You know, he just drew over everything.
Okay.
So a lot of it was like him just looking at an image and saying, well, it should look like this. And some of it was just like adjusting contours of like puffing a cheek out to give it a nice three-quarter view.
Okay.
Other stuff was just, you know, like you wouldn't draw it that way and you would draw it this way. And the animators would, you know, luckily there wasn't like crazy tweaks on the rigs. It was just like, you know, put the wrist here and put that little bender there.
Okay.
Just adjusting things to feel a little bit more organic and the way you would draw it basically.
Okay.
I've mentioned this to a few people sometimes, but like Glenn will draw something and it's like, it's very interesting to watch him draw, and there's videos online of him talking about it and stuff, but he'll look at something and say that the hand wants to be here. And it's like, from that, I got that he's got this relationship with the image he's creating, and it's like talking back to him. And it's not just like him just like projecting onto the page. It's this drawing is like telling him what it wants to be, and saying, the back wants to do this, and it's this weird way of looking at it. But I've since shifted the way I think about stuff.
Oh, that's so cool.
You don't. It's like when I tried to surf, I always tried to push the board around and make it do what I wanted it. And I never realized it's like, no, the board wants to do its thing and you want to go along for the ride. And you're these two things working together. And that's how he was with his drawings. And
that's awesome.
And it's a good way to think about like, what does this thing want to do? And am I forcing it to do something that's unnatural? It's weird. And it applies to CG animation and drawing and figure drawing and all these things. Like, what is this drawing trying to say?
How would you say that you develop that eye then? From your standpoint, with the experience you have now, how would you say an artist, an animator, what should they do to develop that eye?
Yeah, like I guess I have the benefit of like my slow ascent. Tangled, I don't know how many years it was in, like 15 years of doing this, but it's like repetition and studying. And I found for me a good way to kind of analyze animation and learn from animation is I would just find scenes that I liked. I would watch a movie, 2D or 3D or whatever, live action, and just like, I like that scene. There's something about that scene I liked. And I wouldn't be like, I'm looking for this or that. I would just watch a movie and be like, that was a cool scene. And then, all right, stop. Let's grab it. Let's go back, make a quick time of it, and then start breaking it down. Like, what is it? What was the spark and the magic? And then you start to find these things, and it could be like, I was just looking at at the time, 101 Dalmatians of Roger walking down the stairs, writing the music, and he stops and puts the paper on the wall and writes the notes on the wall. He holds the paper against the wall and writes on it. And it's just like, this character is using the environment. And especially in a 2D film where there's not even a real environment, it's an image, but it's like this character's living in that space. And I would just be like, that's a cool concept. This character lives in the world, and they touch the wall and the banister and they pick up the glass on the table. It's like, it's real to them. They look around and they see things. And that was just like, okay, that's a good level above like character walks down the stairs, And so it's just like breaking down every scene that is interesting to you. And it might just be movement and like, well, look, freeze framing through it and look at the squash and the anticipation. And that's a cool shape. And that registered in my mind as like, that was a beautiful visual, but when it plays, you don't see it, but you feel it, And it was just like going back over things over and over. And then you start breaking it down into like, eye direction and squash and stretch and the principles of animation. But it can be so much more of just like, these animators allow themselves to make goofy faces, and that's entertaining and fun. And so it was, years of doing that, and also reading and studying and learning from all these guys. And Glen obviously was a huge influence. Just like talking about like, this is appealing and lectures and talk. I can't pinpoint what it is, but it's just like so focused. And also, like I said, when I was a kid, we went to tons of movies. When I started at Disney, like I saw every movie. I went to the theater every week, and I saw the worst movies and the best movies. And it's just like understanding there's a whole language of film and building that vocabulary and kind of reference of like whatever movie it was. It's like, did you see that scene? And being able to point at something and say, that's what I'm looking for. It's like building that reference. And also at the same time, I read every handout I could get from animation, every lecture that was transcribed, everything, it's just like just soaking in it. After a while, it just starts to sink in.
Very cool. Become part of your DNA, huh?
Yeah.
That's great.
It's I think being obsessive is really important. It really is. It's like, if you want to be a pro, if you want to be good at this thing, you have to be crazy. You have to be a fanatic. And I really respect fanatics. I used to think like, what are these, these people are crazy, but it's like, no, looking back and it's like, you gotta go all in. Look at like someone like Quentin Tarantino. He knows more than anyone about movies, and it's because that's what he does. That's what he lives for. And if you're going to be an animator, you might as well go for it.
Okay. So from Tangled there, what was the next one that you worked on from that?
Well, it's funny because I finished Tangled and we did a Tangled short. And then I was supposed to be head of animation on a film called King of the Elves
Okay.
It was a fantasy movie that Disney was developing. And I forget at the time, I don't know if, who was it? He's in Florida. He teaches drawing. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. Sorry, it's Aaron Blaise. Aaron Blaise and Bob Walker were directing this film, and eventually it went into the hands of Chris Williams, and that's, I think, when I came on. I was going to be head of animation on that, and maybe a year into it, I think Chris Williams decided like this wasn't the movie he wanted to make, and he kind of stepped back from it, and the movie kind of dissolved in our fingers, and so I was without a show, and which was, I think, really great for me because at the time Wreck-It Ralph was being made, and I just went onto that show and I just animated.
Oh, that's cool.
It was great. I hadn't sat and animated for a long time. You know, I did things here and there on Tangled, but not like the chunk of scenes or anything like that. So I got to do a bunch of stuff in Ralph. I did a bunch of 2D, 8-bit video game animation.
That's so cool.
Eventually, I worked on the end credits with Malcolm Pierce and Zach Parrish and Nathan Englehart. We did those end credits, which were great. We just kind of broke them up and handed them all out to animators. So we're just figure out how to make it. And then I went on to Frozen again. I just animated.
Okay.
Because these movies take a while, and a new one coming along to be head of animation on is not that frequent. So it was great, though. I was really happy, and I think I was just talking to Nathan Englehart yesterday. I saw him yesterday, and I think it's really important for supervisors to kind of step back down and join the ranks and just do the work. One, it just keeps you fresh.
Yeah,
two, you understand the tools that people are suffering with. The new hires are like, what the hell is this? Like, oh yeah, that is really wacky. So we should fix that. And also, at the time, I hadn't really animated for probably 2-3 years because I was supervising on Tangled, and there's all these new guys that never saw me animate, and I'm like this boss in quotes, giving them notes and giving them advice, and they're probably like, who the hell is this guy? So you get on the box and you do some scenes, and they're like, oh, okay, this he's actually not full crap.
This knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. So I think it's really good for all those reasons, and then hopefully you move back up and you do the supervising, but I think it's a nice thing to cycle through and allow. And the fourth thing is it allows other people to step up and try the role and see if they like it and see if they're good at it. And if they don't, then they can kind of ease back into the ranks there. But I think it's a really healthy thing.
In your 19 years, that's a significant chunk amount of time. I'm sure that it's a significant amount of time, particularly at such a high level of a studio. What are some of the things that you learned throughout that time? I remember, I don't know if it was a tweet that you had done or something back at that time when you first mentioned you left, and 2 decades. It was just, you were talking about the bittersweetness of that.
Oh yeah, it totally was. People, I get asked all the time, do you miss Disney? It's like, well, of course I miss Disney. Disney's awesome. It's an awesome studio and an awesome place. And it was my home, and I had really intended to kind of retire there, but what did I learn? I mean, I learned everything. I learned everything. Animation. I learned management. I learned recruiting, how to hire good people, storytelling. I mean, it's everything.
Gotcha.
It set me up to be able to go leave Disney and direct a movie. And,
how did that come about? Just out of curiosity, if you like you said, this was such a great place. What was it that then made you feel like an opportunity to go lead?
Yeah, it's interesting because I probably keep saying it's interesting, but doing head of animation on a show, you end up working with a lot of departments. Like as an animator, you get your scenes and you do that, and sometimes you might go to layout and talk about the camera, or you might go to effects and say, hey, what are you going to do here? But that's it as an animator. And then you work with rigging as well, but then you become head of animation and you have to deal with layout, you deal with lighting, you deal with editorial, you deal with all these departments. And then as I did that, and you're actually influencing the movie, you're like, what if we put the camera here? That might help the shot, or the lighting should be like this, or you're filing the shots in tech anim and they're doing the cloth. And you're like, well, this, I found that I really liked all that stuff. I liked everything, and I was like, wow, this is like filmmaking. This is more than animating. And I started to shift my mind to think like, well, maybe one day I could direct something.
Gotcha.
And it was just from having more experience and more influence over the film. It's like, I like this. And it's not like a power thing. It's just like, it's fun to do camera. It's fun to do lighting, and storyboarding and all of it. And so I really, at the end of Tangled, was like, I somehow I want to move into this. And I actually went to the studio. I remember I talked to Andrew Milstein, and I was like, I want to direct one day. I don't know when. I always laugh because I don't know when, I don't know how. And I'm like Little Mermaid. Yeah, I was like, I feel like this is where I want to go, and so hopefully the studio can support me. And they did. They were like, yeah, we'll get you some, just kind of set you up. You can do some, board some shorts and pitch those. Nothing's guaranteed. You got to develop them yourselves, but we're going to give you time and space to work on that. So like the last, 5 months that I was at Disney, that's what I was doing. I was boarding some shorts and I was going to pitch them, and it's just Paul Briggs and Mark Kennedy were mentoring me in storyboarding because I'd never officially done storyboards before. And so that's kind of where I was heading until, another show came along I was going to be head of animation on, but it's like I just wanted to spread out a little bit. And then actually at one point I had a month off, and I was going to rest. and a friend of mine called me. They're like, I hear you have time off. Do you want to go work on some commercials? And I was like, oh man, I want to rest. I want to sleep. I think it was after Tangled. I was exhausted. But I was like,
that was a pretty big or a short production, and the amount of animation.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. and so I was like, I'll go do these commercials. And it happened to be at Illumination. They had just done Hop, that Easter Bunny movie.
Okay, yeah.
And I met John Cohen, who produced that movie, and they were just doing, like, there was a Burger King commercial, there was a Kodak commercial, a Comcast commercial, and we went to like a house and filmed a couch, and then I directed the characters on the couch, And in a month, it was really quick, and we jammed through this work, and it was exciting and fun and just different, hanging out at Illumination and, talking to Chris Maledandri and doing all this stuff. And while I was there, John was really demanding in a good way. I was like, is this funny enough? Is that animation good enough? And I was like, oh, this guy's pushing. This is nice, and that's just what I'm used to. You never know. You go somewhere else and you're like, what's it going to be like? And I just remembered it was a good experience. And after a month, I went back to Disney, and I didn't really tell them about all this because I don't know. But it was my own time, and I guess it was maybe for the competition, but no harm, no foul. And so I went back to Disney, and then 2 years later, I was literally sitting there reading the press release that John Cohen was producing the Angry Birds movie, and my phone rang, and it said John Cohen. And I was like, damn it. And that's really, like, people are like, how do you become a director? I was like, I don't know.
That's crazy.
I took a chance. I met someone. I tried something new, and it turned into 2 years later an offer to direct a movie.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
It is really crazy. A month window of a gap, and that's phenomenal. That is very, very cool. Yeah, so the lesson to studios is don't ever let people take a break. No vacations ever. And it was a thing where, like I said, I planned to be at Disney for my life. This was just one thing that I was like, this is a great offer. If I don't take this offer, I don't know if I will ever get an offer again. Yeah.
There's a big line at Disney. It's not a bad thing. It's just like there's a lot of great directors and a lot of great movies that are lined up for the next 7-8 years. And I was like, I think I have to do this, and it was a really hard decision. And, I cried when I left Disney. Like, there was a big thing, and they made me cry.
Well, as I said, almost 2 decades of your shy.
Really, really hard, and I loved them, and I still love them, and it's like they're my family. But I was like, I got to go do this. I got to see what it's like and see if I like it and see if I can do it. And I'm glad I did. I no regrets.
Absolutely, yeah. I definitely went and saw it. Me and my kiddos. And really liked it. It was a lot of fun. The animation was just phenomenal. Cool. And that was kind of one of the things I wasn't sure going into the movie. When you don't have maybe the big budget or as big of a budget as someone like Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks, you kind of always interesting to see how they'll do it. And from the animation to the effects to the lighting, everything else, it felt top notch. So yeah.
And it's funny because Spy did beautiful work. I was when we were talking about studios that could make this movie, we didn't know apparently at the beginning, and when I found out that it was Spy, Sony Pictures Imageworks, I was overjoyed. Because if it's not DreamWorks or Pixar or Blue Sky or Disney, like who's going to do like that level of film?
Right.
And it was Imageworks, and I was like, oh my god, thank you so much. I was really so relieved, and then. I found out that Pete Nash was going to be the animation supervisor, and I was trying to get him to go to Disney when I was there. Come on over, be a supervisor, come on. And he was like, I'm okay. Then he moved to Vancouver, and he's like, this is my hometown, so I'm happy. But when I heard it was him, I was just like, oh my god, this is like 2 in a row. I'm like, it's all working out, So the team was great, and then Danny Dimian was the VFX soup, and he wasn't officially on the show. But he tells me that over the Christmas break, I wrote him an email. It was like, I really want you to work on the show. And that convinced him to stay on. So emails are good. Asking for what you want is good. But he ended up staying on, and he was fantastic. And really the whole team just overdid it. They did an amazing job. And, for a movie, I think they said the budget at the end was like $73 million or something like that. It's like, it was incredible. And I think a big part of that is just like the 20 years of doing it from my angle, where it's like, I didn't want to waste money. I knew where to kind of spend the money, where to put the detail. The feathers are super important to me. I think the characters should look high tech and high quality. And it was a design thing over the whole movie, where it's like, it's a simple shaped character, but they should look detailed, and it's like you put those two things together and it's somehow special.
Yeah.
And with the environments, they're stylized, but beautiful and kind of rendered in a way that was a little soft and pastel-y. And so we always looked for like the complex versus the simple. And that, I think that helped our production value a lot, where it's just really focusing on what matters on screen. And yeah, I smile when I think about the process, because it's a huge challenge, and going from animation supervisor to director, it's a lot of the same decisions and choices and calls, but it's just huge.
Yeah, much bigger scale.
So much bigger. Yeah.
Was there anything during that process that surprised you? Each movie's different.
Everything's different. I just go back to the crew, and I'm obviously an animator at heart, but just to see the amount of not just work but extra work people put in that wasn't asked for, because like I said, people just want to do excellent work. Animators and artists and technicians and all the people that work on these films, they work on movies because they love movies, and no one's forcing them to, and no one should be forced to, because it's hard. It's hard work and it's long hours, and hopefully it's a good life, but like that's not even guaranteed sometimes. And so the people that do the stuff are really dedicated, and they really just want to make good work, because when their family goes, it's like they can point and say, that's my work on the screen. And it's going to be there forever. And when it comes out on DVD, it's like, that's still my work. And there's just something about it that there's pride in it. And I was just really, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I was really touched and overjoyed at like how much extra stuff people put in. There's background animation going on all the time in this film. It's like really well done. Stuff I never asked. There's gags that happen that I could like just do a DVD commentary, like look at this guy over here and that guy over there. But it's like they overdid it in such a beautiful way. And I was like, sometimes I thought, well, maybe it's just because I'm an animator and they know I'm an animator. I'm one of them, and they want to please me as like, yeah, he's one of us. But I think they probably would have done it anyways. They were just such a great crew, and I really had a great time working with everybody on that show.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, Sony Pictures Imageworks, is that completely distinct from Sony Animation?
Not completely, because it's all the same people.
Okay, that's what I guess my question was, because most of the stuff I've seen from Sony Pictures is more of the VFX type.
Spider-Man,
live action,
Tomorrow, Alice, all that stuff.
Right.
A lot of the same people cross over, but some don't. Some are strictly like creature, robot it, kind of procedural effects kind of guys. But then there's the character guys, and most of the people that worked on Angry Birds had come off of like Cloudy together.
Right.
Pete Nash was head of animation on, I think, the first, but definitely the second. I'm pretty sure Cloudy. So like that whole crew knew him, and they knew how to work with him, and so they were all seasoned 2D guys, but there are also a lot of young kids that this was their first film.
Okay.
And that was cool. You know, it's interesting. And for me, going into this movie, Pete was the only person I knew.
Okay.
Out of 70 animators, like I didn't know any of these guys, and I was like, "Wow, there's a whole world out there, outside of Disney. There's more animators." And like, of course there are. There at Pixar and DreamWorks and Disney and Blue Sky, Real Effects, but McGuff, and they're all out there, and it was really cool to see like this whole swath of people that I never knew. There's one other animator, Klaus Peterson, who was on the show. He was on Tangled with me, but he left after a month. So I drove him back to his home country.
Did you enjoy living up there in Canada?
I did. Yeah. So I was on Angry Birds for 2.5 years, which is a pretty quick production. And 2 of the years I was in Vancouver. So I went up in December, and then 2 Decembers later I moved home. Okay. And it was a great city. I mean, if you're going to be sent away from home and to live somewhere else, like that's a beautiful place to go.
Very cool.
I really liked it. I lived kind of downtown, and I walked to work every day. I didn't want to have to drive anywhere. Take the what do they call it, the SkyTrain. Okay. So it was great. It was great. My wife, she works at Disney. She still works at Disney.
Okay, that's right.
I started at Disney 2 weeks before I did. 19 years before I did. And so, you know, she stayed here in LA. She lived here in our house. And so we did a lot of commuting.
Back and forth there.
From home almost every weekend, or she would come up there. And so it was a lot of traveling. So I never quite felt like I settled in up there. Okay. I had an apartment. I had clothes and things, but I never felt like a full-time resident, even though I was there at least 5 days a week, most weeks. And but it was great. It was really, really a beautiful city, and I love the weather, and the talent there is really nice. It's really over even the 2 years I was there, you could feel it stabilizing and growing and getting stronger. It's amazing. It's like whatever the reason, the tax incentive, or just the fact that all these studios are within blocks of each other. There's so much talent up there, and they kind of shuffle from studio to studio when the projects need that. But it's amazing.
That's great.
It is Hollywood North. Yeah.
How was it working with the team there? At Rovio, in kind of working with them to really meet their vision for this movie?
It was great. You know, Fergal Riley, I should always mention Fergal. He's the other director. And we didn't know each other before this film. And we know all the same people. It's so strange. But we came together on this film. He's definitely a story camera background, and I'm like the animation guy. And then we would both do lighting and effects and design and all that stuff. But it was us, and then we had 2 producers, John Cohen and Catherine Winder, and an executive producer, David Maisel, who had worked at Marvel. He kind of started the whole Thor, Hulk era, and he always talks about Iron Man. and so he was our executive producer, and then the other executive producer was Mikhail Head, who is the guy who runs Rovio, basically. Okay. And they're a Finnish company, and so it was really the 6 people I just named were the creative team. Okay. And the writer, it always gets bigger, and the writer John Beatty, obviously. But like that was like the big kind of when we all got together and talked about the movie and figured it out, and this needs to happen, and that needs. It was just the 6 of us. Okay. You know, again, so different from what I knew in terms of like Disney, where you have the Disney Story Trust, and you have the Pixar Brain Trust, and they all watch these movies together, and they go back and forth, and they give notes, and then you have John Lasseter, and it's like a huge thing, and then you have all the story artists, and this was like the 6 of us saying like, what movie are we making? It was cool. It was really different and fun, and being in the room where it happens, and it was cool. And to go back to your question, like with Rovio, Mikhail was kind of like the guy, and he's a really creative guy. He's been overseeing all their 2D shorts that they do. They're in the app or on YouTube. He's been doing 70 of those. So he's like, he's very versed in cartoons and the stuff that they've done, and he'd always have a take, and he'd always kind of push us to make the humor go a little further, and make a wisdom was like Mikhail, it came out of his head. So it was great, and it was never a thing where people were butting heads and like, no, we want to make this movie, and no, they want to make that movie. It was just like everyone was really on the same page, and it was all about like, how do we make a movie that makes us all laugh, and and hopefully has emotion and has great energy and action. And that was like the big thing where we were all making the same thing. Awesome.
Yeah, because that was, I think, probably the initial, what made it think that movie interesting was going, how are they going to be able to accomplish a full feature movie based upon a puzzle game?
Yeah.
And one of the things I liked about it is that it did have those things that you're mentioning, the story and things that, but it still stayed true to the game, towards the end where they're having to invade the castle and stuff. And so, yeah, I think you're able to kind of merge those two very well. Yeah.
And when Fergal and I both came on, they had a script. They had worked out the basic story. They had John V had written the script. And so it was kind of outlined already. It was just a matter of, okay, let's start boarding this. Is it working? Are the jokes working? And so it would always be a matter of iteration, but it's great. That's something I learned on Tangled, because it was such a big task. I'm backing up a few years, but going back to Tangled, it was like we had such a short time and so much to do in terms of building all these characters in this world and figuring out how to animate it all. And I just, I learned my process is just put something down on paper and make it better.
Okay.
Whatever it is, we have to build these crowds. How are we going to do this? Well, we need, men, we need women, we need boys, we need girls. How many of this? And then you just start churning through the work, and you don't stop until you're done. And it seems like a weird thing, but like it's so easy to kind of like get overwhelmed by the massive work that a movie takes. But with Angry Birds 2, it's just like, all right, what do we need to do? What are the goals? A big thing is like, what do we want to say? What do we want to, what do you want to come out of this movie with? And, like I said, big action, comedy, some emotion, beautiful animation. Like, well, how do we do those things? And then you get down to the details of like, okay, these are birds, but they're not birds. They're creatures. They're bird. We always talk about them as bird-like creatures.
Okay.
What does that mean? And a detail that I'm always happy to talk about, because it was a bit of an experiment. It's like, what are their arms like? And I always felt like Milk Calls bird stuff is amazing, but those thin finger feather things they're a little flimsy to me. And like if these birds are making fists, it's like, what's that going to look like if they're just like these thin paper feathers? And so, I was like, well, what if they're like Oscar the Grouch, and then you put feathers on that. So there's like this furry hand thing, but it's got feathers on the outside. And so I actually took like images of the Cookie Monster and I drew feathers on his arms. I was like, what do you guys think? And there was like, yeah, let's do it. And so it was a cool thing where it's like, you just kind of back up and say, what do we want to say? How do we want to say it? And what's the best way to say it? And you just do it. It's cool. It's like, that's being creative and making a movie and trying something different.
Did you feel like with the time frame that you had, and maybe not the 70 million isn't a small budget, but not the Disney budget that you may be used to, did you feel like you were able to be more efficient with what you had? Like
I think we felt like we had to be efficient, Okay. But at the same time, we did a lot. I mean, there's probably 100 and something different birds in the movie.
Oh yeah.
There's probably 30 different pigs in the movie. There's 2 different islands and environments that are completely, fully figured out, and you could like drop a camera anywhere and like film a shot.
Yeah.
And so it was like a huge amount of just kind of strategy and planning of like, okay, we need this and we need that, and how do you get the track down before the train gets there? Story wise too, of like, we kind of blew up the third act very early on when we were boarding. We got there in storyboards and we realized it wasn't strong enough, and so we kind of, Fergal and I rewrote that whole thing and plotted it out, and then we worked with the writer and that. But we had to do that and understand like, okay, we need to know what happens so we know what to build and how to design the city to serve the story, So luckily, a lot of movies don't have that. They get the set and they're like, well, we built this. What are you going to do there? And build the story around what you have. But we were able to kind of like figure out like long term, like what the problems were going to be.
Okay.
And have to look ahead and see that, and then, plan accordingly. So it's a big part of it is just like being organized and planning and knowing what you want to do.
Okay. I guess that's what I'm getting at, because when I looked at the movie, it didn't look like it suffered visually at all, or like I said, even animations. But I'm going to, how do you do that then on a smaller budget and smaller time frame?
Yeah. And really, like, I can't think of much that we didn't use. I don't think there's any environments we didn't use. There's one sequence, I think it'll be on the DVD, of like Red and Chuck having a slap fight. It was in the middle with Mighty Eagle. Just his section was just getting a little too long, so we just took that out. Thankfully, it worked. But that's kind of the biggest thing that we lost in the movie, like a couple minutes of animation, which is pretty efficient for most film.
Yeah.
So it was all about just like trying not to waste.
Yeah. Now this looks like it's got some great legs on how it's been digitally, at least I know on iTunes and stuff like that. I know it looks like it's done really, really well there too.
Yeah, I think so.
Did that surprise you at all?
No, it's funny because I think you go on Rotten Tomatoes and it's like 43%, which is like heartbreaking. Oh, we didn't get fresh, but it's been a learning process. It's with critics and
right.
For me, it's like in Fergal too. We talked about this a lot because this is our first film, and we were very into like, how does what's this experience like of getting your movie? It comes out and people get to say whatever they want about it. and for me, I don't want to speak for Fergal, but like for me, I just kind of realized that like reviewers have a role in this machine, and they need to have an opinion. Either thumbs up or thumbs down. No one wants to read the thumbs middle. It just doesn't make any sense. So it's like you have to support your argument of like, this is a good movie or it's not. And so either you get it or you don't. And I'm okay with that,
Right.
A lot of people got it and they're like, yeah. And some people totally got what we were trying to do. And they're like, they did this and it was funny and it was sticking. And we're like, okay, at least some people get it. But other people were just like, no, it's not for me. And at the end of the day, it's like, that's the way it is, you just do your best and you put your best foot forward. And we made a movie that made us laugh, and it still makes me laugh. And maybe I just have this strange sense of humor, but it's like, I heard a quote from Paul Rudd once, and he was like, really, I'm a star because 17% of the people like me. That's all that it's all I can make happy. He's like, I'm fine with that. He's like, I'm totally fine with that. And I think it's true. It's like you can't make everyone happy. And
right.
And again, it goes back to my lessons learned in animation. It's like if you do what to be your best at the time, and you don't kind of dial it in and mess up, and it's like you got to be happy with the experience, and you take it to the next thing, and you learn, and you're like, all right, we can do better, but this was a good thing, and this was where I was at the time. And we're really happy with the movie, and and I'm really proud of it, and so is Fergal, and we all are. It's just it's fun, and who knew Angry Birds, this app, could turn into a movie that's actually fun and entertaining.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's phenomenal. Very cool. Okay, so what have you been up to now? You mentioned you've been obviously very busy. What's been keeping you busy now?
It's interesting. We could talk another 2 hours about like what's it like to go find a job in the world. But it's really fun. It's weird. At the end of Angry Birds, it sounds so pompous, but I started to think of myself not as an animator, and I always did. It's funny. It's like I was just like, I'm an animator who's directing a movie. And then a little bit through the second half of the movie, I was like, I'm directing a movie. This is weird. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end, it's like you realize, like, okay, you're doing sound design at Skywalker, and it's like you're fixating on every little detail. Like, how do we make this idea work? How do we make this joke funnier? And we're doing it. The fact that we could do that at that stage, improve the movie as you're mixing, where it's like you're not even changing it. You're just like volumes, and you're like, oh, that's funnier. You start to realize at least this is the pompous part. Like I started looking at myself as a storyteller versus like animator or director. It's just like, that's my job now. It's weird.
That's cool.
It's like I'm a story. We tell stories, and this is what, this is my role in the world. And it's like, so I'm a storyteller now. It's so pompous. I'm sorry.
Hey,
but it's like, it's like a way of shifting the way you think about your job and your role. And it's like, when you think of it that way, you kind of can back up and just look at the world and kind of take in music and imagery and photography, and like, how can all these things help me do what I need to do? And I don't know, it's so like wacky and goofy, but
it sounds more freeing though.
It is. And you're like, okay, like, how do I communicate with people?
Right.
Like, that's what it is. It's not like, I don't know, it's just like a weirder, more ethereal way of looking at like communicating and connecting to people. Not so much about the ones and zeros and the nuts and bolts of like, we cut this frame and that frame. It's like, it's more of a feel thing. And so that's a weird tangent, but so about a month before the movie came out, I actually rolled off at Rovio, and that's kind of when my external journey started in the world of Hollywood, and it's been about 5 months now.
Okay.
It's really cool and fun. And so what a person like me does, and I've heard Patrick talk about this, Patrick Osborne.
We've had him on the podcast.
Talked to John Cars about this, and it's like you go out in the world, and we have agents because we've directed a movie, so we're lucky enough to have someone say, yeah, we'll represent them, and the agents know everybody. And they said, we're going to send you to Warner Brothers to talk to this producer, or we're going to send you to Westwood to this office where this producer works. And you go and you meet them, and they say, well, who are you? And what do you do? And I haven't seen the movie yet, but what do you want to do? And you just talk about yourself and the movies you want to make and the stuff that's influenced you. And then either they like you or they don't. And then they'll kind of, the thing I find at most places is they'll have like one thing, and they'll kind of slide it across the table and be like, check this out. And it's like a comic book, or it's a classic piece of literature, or a newspaper article that they bought the rights to, and they're like, what do you think about this? And either it's like really fleshed out, or they have no idea what to do with it. And they hopefully you'll come in and be like, this is what you do. And sometimes it sparks and it works, and other times it doesn't. And it's like, okay, that's a good try. But for me, what that means is like I sit here in my house all day long with my dog Chewbacca, and I write pitches, and I write stories, and I write, this is what I would do with this property, or I'm adapting a screenplay, a children's book into a screenplay. I just finished that.
Very cool.
Like this week, I finished my first draft.
That's awesome.
And so it's a lot of meeting and just connecting with people that want to tell the same stories as you.
That is awesome.
And it's great. And some people you really click with, and other people it's like, no, we're not the same, and that's okay. And there's the good thing is there's lots of people out there, and there's lots of movies. And the other thing that I've learned is that when I was first, even before I started looking, they would send me scripts here and there, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool script. And I was busy making the movie at the time, and then a couple weeks later, you see in Variety, this, director is attached to this movie. You're like, wow, that's fast, Things come and go, and it's like a train station, Like Hollywood's always going to make a movie next year. And you realize that, if you don't get on this train, there's going to be another one.
There's another one coming, huh?
Yeah, and there's so much cool stuff out there, and so many cool things people want to make. And it's just a matter of finding one that clicks with what I want to say, and that I click with the people that I, want to say it, and that we all like each other and want to work together. And the good news is there's a lot of good people out there, and it's exciting. It's an awesome job.
It seems like go direct a movie, and now it seems like this is also an interesting time too, because as you're mentioning the animation canvas, you were like it was Disney and DreamWorks and Pixar, and then you're like, well, Blue Sky and Real Effects and McGruff, and you're naming all these here. There seems to be this more an open canvas here, and then you even look at what Patrick's in the VR realm, or the shorter stories, or what Netflix is doing and picking up. What's the one? Little Prince, is that it?
Yeah.
And so there just seems like there's a lot more of a venue here for that kind of thing. Have you noticed that as well? Is that kind of the arena that you're dealing in and enjoying, or how's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so much potential for content. There's so many outlets now, and the funny thing is, like, a lot of studios don't understand animation, not as a way of storytelling, but like actually making, like, the production process.
Okay.
So a lot of live action producers kind of throw up their hands up, like, well, we don't know animation. We want to make a film, but we don't know how to do it. So it's very interesting that it's almost a very unique pipeline that only people know the secrets. But there's thousands of those people. So animation is kind of its own thing until everyone understands how to do it. But it's very own. It's not a genre for sure. It's a medium.
Right.
But it's like animation is going to kind of stick with animation until people take chances on it and hire other people to do it for them. You know, unless you're a standalone animation studio. But yeah, it's cool because you have your Netflixes and Vimeo has like pay-per-view.
Yeah.
There's a lot of outlets in the VR stuff, and so there's a lot of people that want to make a lot of content. And the fact that animation dominates box office now, it's not just like a news report every once in a while. It's like it's a fact.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it. And you'd be a fool not to have animation in your slate. It's a cool thing, and it's good for everybody, Yeah. And the other thing that just doing Angry Birds that I realized, and it's really nice, is like we worked with artists all over the world. Like now today, I mean, we're doing this over the internet, and it's like you don't have to be in the same place anymore. And we had a painter in Vietnam, and we had a modeler in Spain, and we had a character designer in Brazil, and it's like, yeah, just send the work in, we'll be here, and it's cool that you can work with people that you maybe wouldn't have been able to work with.
Yeah.
In the past. And you can build an amazing virtual studio. It seems so cheesy to say it, but you really can do it. And you can, I think it's even every day it's getting easier and better. And you can do amazing things with, in a way, it's like crowdsourcing.
Yeah.
It's, you do it officially and you can pay people, and there's lots of ways to make movies now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, here's a question for you. What's been one of your favorite films to work on?
Tangled is just like, we're always going to be proud of that. I think.
Okay.
It's just like, even if it gets outshined in the future, it was like at the time, it was like we did what we set out to do.
Okay.
It's funny, as far as films I worked on, my favorite film is Wreck-It Ralph.
Okay.
Sensibilities.
That's one of my favorites.
I love that movie, and just like, it's one of those things where you just feel very fortunate to work on a movie that you would go see, you would pay money to go see this movie, and then Angry Birds, it's a very, when I say personal, it's not like this is my story,
right?
But, there's just so much of me in it, obviously, because I directed it, and it's weird. It's weird to kind of step back and realize you had that much influence over something.
Yeah.
And it's not like, let me get my fingerprints all over this thing. It's just like, I'm seeing animation every day, directing shots, and if someone's looking for an idea, and I said, well, try this, and everyone laughs and they do it. Well, it's like, that's me again on the screen. When my wife went and saw it, she kept slapping me because she kept saying,
knew it was you.
She's like, oh, that's so you. That's so you. And she kept hitting my leg during the screenings. So I'm like, yeah. Sorry. So it's like, it's cool it's like eye-opening to realize like you can kind of have a piece of you out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had never felt that much.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of me in this movie. And it's kind of empowering to be like, in a good or bad way. Maybe there should be less of me in the world. But it's like, it just changes your perspective. I'm like, well, I could really, that's what directing and movie making and storytelling is about. It's about saying something and hopefully making it personal.
Was there any favorite parts from the movie on Angry Birds that you liked that stand out to you?
Yeah. I just really loved the performances. I think they did an amazing job of really kind of taking care to make these characters real and distinct. Red, Chuck, and Bomb, when they first go to class and they meet each other, that's one of my favorite sequences. Just the action in Act 3, I think a lot of the reason is because Fergal and I worked so hard to kind of construct that, and the procedure of it, and the process, and the getting from A to Z in that whole Act 3, just the build. And it was a lot of us sitting with a Google Doc, sharing and typing and copying and pasting paragraphs and just working out like, okay, this is the progression of that. It's going to build to a nice ending. And just the way that all plays out with the humor. And that was a big thing, where the movie's obviously a comedy, but we didn't want to lose the funny once we got to the action. So it's like, okay, how do we tell funny action? And I think, and we did a good job.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's a challenge and it's fun. And, it's just, I don't know, it's a rewarding job, man. It's so cool. It's like Ferris Bueller. What did you say? I highly recommend it.
That's right. I think it was Jamal Bradley told me one one time he was talking about how, people complaining or this and that. He's like, look, you're an animator. You're animating.
Yeah.
It's just fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I used to do the podcast, people would send me emails and they're like, yeah, I only do, animation on phone apps. I'm like, dude, you're not digging ditches. This is awesome. Like, don't stay there forever, but like, it's good. It's good. No, it's great. And like my niece, she's 12 years old now, and she is getting into like acting and creative stuff, and I'm always just like, yes, be creative. That's life. That's like so much better than, like, no offense to accountants, but being an accountant, it's just like, I don't know, you can say and do so much and hopefully affect people, and even if it's just making people laugh, that's a great thing. But when people tell me they cry at Angry Birds, I'm like, yes,
that's cool.
That's such an encouraging piece of feedback, and Fergal and I are always, we're like, we got to find a way, and not everyone will, but some people do. And it's like the fact that you can touch someone like that and do it through a funny movie, it's really, I don't know, it's just special.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't have to do with directing. I mean, that's one thing, but it's just like being a part of it and animating and telling stories and doing art and all of it. It's just like, that's the life, man.
Yeah. Okay, any favorite characters you've worked on in your history that you just that stick out to you, that you felt like, hey, if I could ever go back and just animate that one again, I'd love to.
Rhino in Bolt was great. It was just, I've had such a lucky career in terms of just working on great things. And Mark Walton, he was a storyboard artist at the time. He did the voice for it, and so we would talk about it a lot and kind of like work back and forth on that. And you don't always get that with the actors. It was a challenge, and it was a funny character, and I think it was a standout of the movie, not by anything I did, just it was a great character. And I think it was, all these experiences are learning experiences. And the thing I took away from that was, like, I didn't do the best scenes of that character, even though I was a supervisor. I think Hiram Osmond, who is now the supervisor on Moana, he's head of animation on Moana right now. Like, he rocked it. And that is the way it should be. I mean, you should support people to do their best and to kill it and be okay with it. And it's like, they make you look good. And that's really, like, it translates into directing, where it's like, you need to support these people to do their very best, because whatever they do that's awesome makes you look awesome. And it's this big team thing, know? Right. So, there's no place for pride in, in animation, where it's like, when people do great work, you have to applaud it, no matter who it is.
Right on. Kind of maybe taking a slight detour here. I noticed on one of your bios, it said something about Frogbot Films.
Yeah.
What is,
that's me.
You're right. Can you explain some of that here? What is that about?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My email, since email began, was Frogbot. It's always Frogbot. And it comes from a childhood nickname I had, and I was always like playing with frogs, and it's just really embarrassing. But anyhow, so my wife and I have decided to start this production company, and the goal is to make movies, and I'm sure it'll take a while to build up, but the idea is, I look at people like J.J. Abrams with Bad Robot, and like, that's a dream, where it's like, I've never been there, I've never talked to them, but like, I imagine it's like this fantasy land where they're all making TV shows and movies and video games and t-shirts, and it's like working together, living the dream, being creative, working with people you love, and you want to surround yourself with creatives that can't wait to go to work because they're doing awesome stuff.
Yeah, very cool.
That's like the long-term goal of what this production company is going to be. But so now it's just, a matter of like finding the projects and starting to develop them and eventually producing films. And it's not a thing where I need to direct everything. I would be happy to work with people that direct their own stuff, but that's the long-term goal. Yeah.
Very cool. That's why I wanted to check it out here, just to give you a little airtime, but also to hear more about it.
Yeah.
Well, I will let you go because I know how much family time is. Clay, I really just appreciate the conversation. Like I said beforehand, just getting to coming across you, I'll say, not getting to know you, but coming across you via the animation podcast. Those were a great resource. And so I wanted to thank you for doing those, but it was great to get you on the other side of the table here. So I really do appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Best of luck to you.
All right. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.